Hey, what's up guys? This is our second part of Storytelling Thursday. So, on the first video I talked about how we came up with our rigging needles and why we changed the format of them. Now, with that being said, it still does not decrease any factors of accidents can happen. And because of that, you've always got to be prepared for the worst case scenario. Now, where we fish during these tournaments, a lot of times in no man's land, where you're on your own wits and your own vehicles and so forth. The story I'm going to tell you now, we actually lucked out with having a numerous amount of people there and a numerous amount of vehicles that we could rely on to make an emergency trip off the beach. And yes, this was an emergency because on this story, I got invited to go set up my shark fishing gear for a bunch of campers that were coming in, and it was from a group called 24-Hour Campfire. Well, one of my buddies, Roger Hunter, was the main guy that organized it, and he knew me, and he wanted to put out his shark fishing gear, but he wanted to make sure too that he had enough knowledge out there and other help that could help them land a shark if they did hook up into one, which is always the goal. You go out there to try to catch a shark. So me and my buddy Jonathan and Roger were the three main guys that knew shark fishing out of the whole crew. A bunch of chefs and cooks and doctors and other kind of professions were out there with us. And so we start rigging up camp. They start doing their thing. We start doing our thing. And at that point, we start pulling out our baits, and Jonathan, hey man, you know, I rig up these, and I say, yeah, go and start with the bonitas, rig them this way, and you know, I separate the hooks real quick with him, and he rigged up the first one, and he goes, hey man, like this, and I was like, yeah, all right, cool, you know, keep doing it like this, and I turned, and as soon as I turned, he goes, hey Albert, we got a problem, and I look back. All right, so this is one of our shark rigging needles. This is one of the heavier size gauges that we have, and this is for when we have frozen baits and we're trying to pound, you know, push it through without bending the shaft. So, you know, as he stood up, I see him holding his arm like this, and it's like this. And so for a split second, I look at him and I look at that, and you know, I thought for a second that he was messing with me. Until I realized, as you can see here, me pushing it on there, there's a couple of things I was looking for. And one was the notch or the knife edge. And I didn't see either. All I saw was the skin up, push up like this, and it was straight across. And I was like, bro, that's in your arm. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, come this way, because I could see him like, he kind of teeter-tottered like this, and I was like, dude, he's about to faint. Obviously, you don't tell people that, because sometimes that'll end up scaring them more than anything else. You know, you're trying to coach them to where you need them to be before it actually happens. So, he's standing here like this, so I grab a hold of him, because he's a big guy, and I turn him this way, and I grab the door handle here, because my driver's side door was open, and you know, I had the door jamb right here. And so right at that point, he starts to buckle. So I pin him up against the door jamb and that, you know, using my body weight to hold him, because the dude's a big guy. He's easily in the 250 mark, 240 mark. And so he starts to drop, and I automatically knew that if that needle continued to go through, we'd have a lot more problems. Because at that time, I didn't know how far it had gone in. You know what I mean? So, you know, I pushed him up like that, and the few more guys that were out there saw what had happened, so they were already on their way to where we were at. And one of them, we get lucked out, was a doctor. And so he comes up, he's like, let me check him. He's like, I'm a doctor. And I'm like, all right, cool. So I'm holding him there, you know, pinning him up like that. I mean, he's just, he's totally buckling. And so I pinned him up like that, and then finally, you know, the doctor checked it to see if he could retract it. I said, I don't know if that's a good idea, because the barb that we cut into the backside to catch the cable loops is into his arm, you know, and I told that to the doctor. And so, you know, but, you know, we still had to check just because there was fish flesh on the tip of that barb and stuff like that. So we know that when you have anything like that, the longer it stays in your system, the more it can mess you up and cause bacteria growth and so forth. So at that time, that's when more people get involved. They start calling more the guys from the camp that was there. And so we start developing a game plan of how to get him off the beach, because my truck was already set up. We had several rods out in the water. For me to sit there and pull them in, you know, to get him off the beach would have been hours of work. So Roger and his buddy, he's like, well, I got a Jeep. I can get off the beach pretty quickly. So at that point, he regained his composure, and he's like, all right, I can walk. And so finally, I could see the color come back into him because he got real pale. And so I knew if he fell, it could have been real catastrophic damage. So I held him up, got him, walked him to the truck and stuff like that. But what we tried to do was keep it stabilized so that way we knew the drive was going to be a pain, because the tide had come up and it was kind of not high dunes driving, but it was right in the middle. The low road wasn't available. So they pack him up and they end up heading down beach to get him off of there. They return hours later, and I don't remember if he returned or not. I don't think he returned. I think he went home at that point. But the doctors were able to remove it out of there, and I got to get with him to see if I can get that picture. But he took an X-ray, and what it did was it came up all the way right into the hinge area right there. And the doctor said he lucked out, because if he had gone any further, then he could have really messed up his joints right up in here because of the barb, and they would have had to cut him open. They were able to retract the needle without having to do any extra surgery, and so he ended up lucking out very big time, and which is very good, you know what I mean? We hate to see anybody get hurt and so forth, but the good thing is, you know, when something happens or an accident, don't lose focus of what's got to get done. You know, keeping pressure or maintaining their composure or their body is another one. You know, with me, you know, if I would have collapsed without keeping pressure on that wound, I probably could have bled out. Maybe it would have taken a little bit longer because it was a foot wound. However, it still can happen if nobody knows what's going on. And with him, if he would have fallen, he could have, you know, seriously had a lifelong, you know, disability in his hand or so forth, or had to go through a lot more surgeries. So if you ever see somebody in some kind of trouble like that, you gotta assess the situation of what could happen and try to prevent it. Sometimes you don't think on your feet and stuff like that, but this is just something that we've gone through with the rigging needles by themselves. So, you know, and again, it reminds me of a story I've got with the gaff. So that's a pretty cool story too. And I tell you what, I've got a scar about this big because of it. So, you know, it is what it is. We do go fishing, we do run into accidents, but it's not going to stop us from doing it. So, y'all have a good one, and I hope y'all enjoyed the story. It was pretty crazy.